your mind.
In a dimly lit library, I became engrossed in the chilling legend of Magdalena Solís, a notorious female killer from the 1960s known as the High Priestess of Blood. Amid dusty tomes and forgotten archives, each record and newspaper clipping unveiled a darker layer of her sinister story. Each flicker of the overhead lights drew me deeper into her macabre past, resonating through the ages, while the late-hour solitude heightened the haunting nature of her crimes, unveiling the unsettling psyche of this infamous High Priestess of Blood. Magdalena, born on July 13, 1945, in Tijuana, Mexico, spent her formative years in this bustling border city. Her family's beliefs in the supernatural and their participation in dark rituals created a unique and eerie environment within their small, tight-knit community. Magdalena's earliest memories are bathed in an atmosphere where the lines between the ordinary and the bizarre are often blurred. When abandonment and destitution claimed Magdalena's family, she found herself orphaned in a cruel world at just 15 years old. With nowhere to turn in her remote region, she resorted in desperation to selling her body to survive. Her own brother Eleazar became both guardian and tormentor, exploiting Magdalena's youth and beauty for profits while keeping barely enough food on her plate. Trapped under his domineering thumb, she endured his abuse as her innocence withered away. It was the early 1960s when she first met Santos and Cayetano Hernandez. Magdalena was a young woman making a difficult living through prostitution in Monterrey. The brothers approached her with an unusual proposition to take part in a ruse they had concocted to swindle the poor, uneducated villagers of Yerba Buena. Magdalena knew the false promises of Incan gods and riches were pure fabrication. She was in no position to decline their offer. She agreed to play the role of a reincarnated goddess as part of an elaborate ceremony. Using simple tricks and theatrics, the brothers convinced the villagers Magdalena was the deity they had long awaited. She could see the desperation and hope in their eyes as they looked upon her with reverence. In truth, she was merely a pawn in the brothers' greedy scheme. Yet somehow, Magdalena began to believe her own deception. The power she held over those people awakened in her a sense of destiny, one that would soon lead Magdalena and her followers all down a dark path. She allowed the illusion to consume her. No longer was she Magdalena the prostitute, but Magdalena the goddess. This was the beginning of her tragic transformation. Though she knew it was all based on lies, Magdalena embraced the role fully. When the Hernandez brothers lost control, leadership of the cult fell to Magdalena. By then, she was but a vessel, guiding the group blindly on warped faith alone. It wasn't long before doubt infected two members exhausted by never-ending abusive rituals. They tried fleeing Magdalena's grip, but the other followers, paralyzed by fear, dragged them before their crazed blood priestess to decide their fate. Solis's judgment was unequivocal: death for the traitors. The terrified cult dared not question her authority. They lynched the two defectors as she watched pitilessly. In her short time with the cult, Magdalena had already seized absolute power, but it was this first real test that cemented her role as merciless dictator. Her throne was now built upon two fresh graves, with the bones of friendship and trust buried inside. None would dare challenge her commands again. The Magdalena who first arrived seeking purpose was gone, warped beyond recognition. Now there was only the High Priestess and her frightened, obedient followers. After Magdalena claimed her first kills, a grim evolution began within the cult. Their depraved ceremonies were no longer enough to satisfy her deepening bloodlust. She demanded the ultimate sacrifice, human life given to fuel her delusions of divinity. Her followers offered up living bodies upon her profane altar, beating and burning victims as she watched with delight. They cut flesh until it gave up its precious blood, filling her cup mixed with chicken blood for vile rituals. She forced the other members to drink as well, claiming it gave them unnatural power. Consumed by grandiose visions, Magdalena believed herself the living incarnation of an Aztec goddess who sustained her immortality by drinking blood. Her every command perverting ancient myth to justify her sadistic appetite. For 6 weeks the horrors continued, 4 lives cruelly extinguished. In her insatiable madness, she pushed further, carving into helpless bodies on her altar, greedily harvesting organs from the still living. No life was sacred, no act too depraved for Magdalena's pursuit of power through gore. She reduced her followers to eager accomplices in atrocity, all too willing to please their blood-soaked queen. As she stared into her victims' dying eyes, she saw only the reflection of her own dark godhood staring back. In May of 1963, a local resident, a 14-year-old boy named Sebastian, stumbled upon her blood rituals. Drawn by forces beyond his childish grasp, he witnessed things no innocent should see. His panicked scream sliced through their frenzied drumbeats at the height of her profane ceremony. Her followers gave chase, but failed to capture the fledgling who escaped into the woodland shadows. No matter, he was ignorant of the divine events he had disturbed. Driven by terror, Sebastian raced over 25 kilometers to desperately rave his tale of vampire worship and human sacrifice to the nearest police station. The officers ridiculed his ravings, all except Inspector Martinez. Skeptical yet dutiful, Martinez accompanied the boy back to investigate the caves at dawn, never emerging again. For deep underground, Magdalena's disciples lay in wait with hungry ambition in their eyes at the first sign of interlopers. Shadowy forms dragged the 2 captive lambs toward the ritual chamber, adorned with gory remnants of unholy rites. Echoes rang out, then silence took hold, blessing their passage into the endless caverns below as they were swallowed up in darkness. Neither badge nor cry for mercy could save them. The cult had plans to transform these innocent creatures into materials for Magdalena's profane theater. As moonlight peered down, only foul things moved below amongst those lightless tunnels. But Magdalena's theatrics reached a fever pitch when the inspector himself was laid upon the altar, stripped of titles and dignity. His screams of stark mortal terror pierced the cave walls, exposing their unholy secrets for good. Fear and zeal flooded her disciples' veins in equal measure as events spiraled out of control. Alarmed by the vanishing of Guerrero and Martinez, police took the case seriously, whispering of a satanic cult. On 5/31/63, police coordinated with the army to launch a search op in rural Yerba Buena. The chief led armed cops and soldiers to the isolated hamlet at dusk, seeking clues behind the disappearances. Scouring abandoned buildings and woodlands by flashlight, they pressed on hungry for answers. But when their torchlight hit the hillside caves, searchers stumbled into terrors worse than rumors. Faced with gruesome evidence of Magdalena's vile harvest, authorities could no longer deny an unspeakable evil festered in their backyard. Subsequent probes revealed the carved corpses of Guerrero and Aunt Martinez on a farm where Eleazar and Magdalena were nabbed, trying to stockpile loads of marijuana. Investigators then uncovered 6 more mutilated bodies near the caves. Magdalena and Eleazar drew 50 years for 2 murders, but no direct ties to the other 6 killings as arrested cultists refused testimony. Many cult members were shot by the police during a shootout after they barricaded themselves in the caves. The others received a sentence of 30 years in prison for their role in the cult murders. Only years later would ex-members break their silence on the cult's guts-chilling horrors. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Radio Mind. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support is invaluable and truly helps us grow. Stay tuned for more engaging content, and until next time, be safe, and remember, don't let everyday stresses kill your spirit and imagination.